My name is Jenna Collins. I'm 31, and I design packaging for a cosmetics company in a mid-sized city called Hallow Ridge. Life wasn't exactly a fairy tale, but I liked its rhythm. Comfortable, predictable, until it wasn't. That night was supposed to be a celebration. The restaurant was glowing under dim amber lights. White roses floated in crystal bowls on each table, soft jazz drifted through the speakers, and a low hum of laughter surrounded us. Everything was perfect, or it looked that way on the surface. It was our engagement party, and after nearly 5 years together, Alec and I were officially on the path to becoming husband and wife. 4 months from now, we'd be saying our vows under a canopy of string lights at a vineyard just outside town. I could already picture it. Alec stood beside me, tall, broad-shouldered, and completely in his element. His hand rested casually on my back, grounding me in the moment. I met him during a team-building workshop back when we both worked at a marketing firm. He was the new copywriter with an effortless smile. I was the skeptical designer who hated icebreakers. We bonded over our mutual sarcasm and a shared love for diner milkshakes. The rest, as they say, was history. Around us were friends, co-workers, college buddies, and extended family. People we hadn't seen in years. Some traveled hours just to be here. It should have been magical. And for a minute, it was. Then my mother stood up with a glass of wine and a too bright smile. "Can I have everyone's attention, please?" she said, tapping the stem with a spoon. Her tone was cheery, but her eyes icy and calculating hinted at something else. I smiled anyway. This was the part where she'd say something sweet and slightly embarrassing, then sit down before getting misty. But instead, she raised her glass and spoke like she was making an announcement at a shareholders meeting. "Congratulations to my daughter Jenna and her fiancé Alec. May your marriage be filled with joy, patience, and compromise." Polite clapping, a few chuckles. Alec squeezed my hand under the table, and I leaned into him slightly, relaxing. But then she added, "And now, just a quick update for the family. After a long conversation with Graham and some reflection, we've decided to give Jenna's wedding fund to Carly instead." Wait, what? I blinked, convinced I misheard. I laughed nervously, eyes darting to my younger sister across the room. She was already looking smug, arms folded, her phone screen lighting up in her hand. "I'm sorry, what?" I said, my voice not rising but sharp enough to cut the air. My mom's smile didn't waver. "Your sister's wedding is just 2 months after yours, and she and Rob are. Well, they're not in the best financial position. You and Alec are doing fine, so we figured—" "That money is mine," I interrupted, loud enough now for heads to turn. "You and Dad gave it to me 3 years ago, when I got engaged the first time. And after that fell through, you told me to keep it for whenever I actually used it." Mom's face stiffened. "Things changed, Jenna." I stood up, heart pounding. "Yeah, and so does respect, apparently." Carly rolled her eyes dramatically. "God, you always make things about you. Maybe if you weren't so stingy, I wouldn't have to ask for it. I planned ahead." "You didn't," I snapped. "That's not stingy. That's being responsible. You have a job and a partner with a great income." My mom shot back, voice rising. "Carly's barely scraping by. She needs help. And I needed a family that didn't keep picking favorites," I said. The room had fallen completely silent. Alec gently touched my elbow, but I shook him off. I didn't need calming. I needed honesty. "You know what?" I said, stepping away from the table. "Let's clear this up now. That money is legally mine. It was transferred into an account in my name. I've been budgeting with it for months. We've already paid deposits. You don't get to just reclaim it because Carly burned through hers." That's when Carly shot up from her seat. "You're unbelievable," she hissed. "You always act like you're better than me. You think just because you don't make mistakes—" "I don't think I'm better," I said, "but I do think I shouldn't be punished because you and Rob spent 10 grand on a rustic engagement shoot with horses you don't even own." The gasp from my Aunt Lydia felt theatrical, but honestly, she wasn't wrong. Then came the slap. My mother stormed over to me and slapped me across the face in front of everyone. I staggered back. The entire restaurant froze. All I could hear was the ringing in my ear and the collective intake of breath from every single guest. A fork clattered onto a plate in the silence. Someone's drink spilled. I slowly turned my face back toward her, blinking away the sting. "You just hit me," I said softly. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, breathing hard, jaw tight. That's when the waiter by the bar picked up his phone and quietly said, "Yeah, I need to report an assault." It just happened in the main dining room. The sirens came faster than I expected. 2 officers entered the restaurant not 10 minutes later. My father tried to smooth things over, murmuring, "It's a misunderstanding," but no one was buying it, not the cops, not the guests, not even Carly, who looked like she finally realized things had gone too far. The officer asked me if I wanted to press charges. And you know what? I did. Right there in my favorite restaurant, on what should have been one of the happiest nights of my life, I said yes. They handcuffed my mother and let her out. The whispers followed, the glares, the awkward shifting of chairs as people tried to figure out if they should clap, cry, or finish their chicken piccata. Alec didn't say a word the whole time. He just held my hand. That night, after speaking with my lawyer, I filed a formal complaint. But it wasn't just about the slap. It was about everything it stood for. I didn't sleep that night. Alec made tea, tried to distract me with reruns of our favorite sitcom, but I just stared at the ceiling, replaying every second from the restaurant, the toast, the slap, the way my mother's face twisted like I was a stranger who'd embarrassed her publicly, not her daughter standing up for herself. By sunrise, I felt hollow, not angry, not sad, just tired. My lawyer, Camila Strauss, met me the next afternoon in her office downtown. I still had the faint red mark on my cheek. She noticed immediately. "You sure you want to press charges?" she asked gently, sliding a legal pad across the desk. "This isn't a simple family dispute. It's public assault." I didn't even hesitate, I'm sure. "Okay then," she nodded. "This won't be quick, Jenna, but it will be clean." It wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries. About finally showing my mother, my whole family, honestly, that I wasn't going to keep shrinking myself to make space for Carly. The hearing came fast. Security footage from the restaurant made everything undeniable. Witnesses, friends, colleagues, even the bartender submitted statements. My mother didn't cry, didn't apologize. She stood in court like it was beneath her, lips pursed, eyes empty. My dad sat beside her, silent, wearing a blank expression that somehow hurt more than the slap. The judge fined her $2,000, ordered anger management, and gave her 6 months probation. She avoided jail, but just barely. As the courtroom emptied, I waited, hoping stupidly that she might look at me, say something, anything. She didn't. Carly wasn't there. Figures. My sister had always been allergic to accountability. After that, the silence stretched on like a punishment no one admitted they were giving. No calls, no texts. Just this vacuum where a family used to be. Alec kept me afloat. He reminded me that peace, even when quiet and lonely, is still peace. And we needed peace if we were going to survive what came next. Because just when I thought I'd weathered the worst of the storm, a thick manila envelope showed up in our mailbox. Inside, a lawsuit. My parents were suing me for control of the $45,000 fund. Their claim? That it was intended for education only, and that I'd misused it. I sat on the kitchen floor, staring at the document like it was written in another language. "Are you kidding me?" Alec muttered, pacing the room. "They can't be serious." "They are," I whispered, heart hammering. "They're rewriting history now." Here's the truth. When I was 17, my parents opened a custodial account in my name. It was always labeled as for the future. That was it. No fine print, no formal restrictions. They told both Carly and me that once we turned 19, the money was ours, no strings attached. I used some for college. Got a scholarship, kept the rest invested. I lived small, planned ahead, and let it grow. Carly? She blew through her entire fund before she was 23. First on a private art school she dropped out of. Then on a doomed boutique business and a lease on a BMW she couldn't afford. When her rustic bridal planning agency flopped, she had nothing left but credit card debt and excuses. So now they were coming after mine. Camila looked through the case and shook her head. "They don't have a legal leg to stand on," she said, calm as ever. "But be prepared. Cases like this, they're messy. Not because of law, but because of emotion. And messy it was. We entered months of filings, countersuits, discovery, and court dates. Every email felt like a gut punch. Every hearing scraped another layer off me. Alec came to all of them, his fingers always laced with mine. He never wavered, but I could see the frustration building in him too. What made it worse? My parents didn't even hide that the entire lawsuit was about bailing Carly out. Her name wasn't on the documents, but her fingerprints were all over the drama. And during one preliminary hearing, I saw her smirking from the back of the courtroom like this was all entertainment. That day, I snapped. I stood in the hallway afterward, facing her directly for the first time in weeks. "Is this what you wanted?" I asked. "To watch me burn because you ran out of rope?" She rolled her eyes. "It's not personal, Jenna. You just don't need the money the way I do." I laughed an actual stunned laugh. "So because I planned ahead and didn't crash my life into a wall, I'm the bad guy?" "No," she said simply. "You're just privileged and spoiled." That nearly made me lose it. "I'm disciplined, Carly. There's a difference." Camila stepped in before I said something I couldn't take back, but the damage was already done. There was no coming back from this. During the next hearing, Carly took the stand to support my parents' claim that the funds were always meant for school. Camila was ready. "Miss Collins," she began calmly, "did you use your entire fund solely for educational expenses?" Carly fumbled. "Well, I mean, most of it." "Did you? Or did you not use a portion of it to rent Instagram influencers for your failed business?" Carly shifted uncomfortably. "It was a marketing strategy." "And did you or did you not buy a luxury vehicle that was later repossessed?" "I was told it was an investment." Camila didn't need to say more. The courtroom had heard enough. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. By then, the cracks were obvious. This wasn't about college. It was about control, about punishing me for not falling in line, for not letting Carly skate through life while I footed the bill. The media didn't catch wind of it, thankfully, but word still spread through the family. Some relatives went radio silent. Others texted awkwardly, not knowing what side to land on. One person who didn't hesitate? My cousin Elise. She called me one night with her voice low and urgent. "I thought you should know," she said. "Carly's been telling people the wedding is off, that Alec cheated on you." I blinked. "What?" "She's spreading rumors, telling everyone that Alec was unfaithful and you're just pretending the wedding's still happening." I nearly dropped the phone. Elise wasn't lying. Within hours, I had texts from friends, distant cousins, even my college roommate asking if everything was okay. Someone even forwarded me a fake email sent from an address that looked like mine announcing the wedding was canceled. I checked my inbox, nothing there, no sent message, no drafts. Someone had made a copycat account and was impersonating me. Alec was furious. "She's not just trying to steal your money," he said. "She's trying to destroy your reputation." Then it got worse. "She sent me photos," Alec said quietly. My stomach dropped. "What kind of photos?" He showed me, blurry, obviously doctored pictures of me my face photoshopped onto someone else's body, hugging a man I'd never seen. It was laughably fake, but the intent was brutal. "She really thought I'd believe this," Alec said, shaking his head. We sat in silence for a long time. That night, we made a decision. We hired a security team, not for protection, but for peace of mind. Carly, my parents, none of them would be allowed anywhere near our wedding. I hated that it had come to this. But I hated more the idea that they'd ruin one more thing I worked so hard to build. We rewrote the guest list, sent out updates, swapped vendors. The wedding would still happen just without the people who didn't want us happy. And yet, I still had this gnawing feeling that Carly wasn't finished. The next few weeks were a blur of wedding prep, legal paperwork, and emotional landmines. There were moments I'd catch myself staring into space, clutching a list of flower vendors while wondering how everything had spiraled like this. My family was suing me. My sister was trying to ruin my engagement, and my mother still hadn't said a word, not a call, not a text, not even a snide email. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. Alex stayed calm. He always did. His way of loving me was quiet but unshakable. He brewed coffee while I drafted statements. He held my hand when the lawyers called. He made me laugh at the dumbest things just to pull me back from the edge. But I could tell this was getting to him too. We'd planned this wedding with care. Nothing over the top, just honest and personal. A garden ceremony outside Ridge. String lights. Tacos instead of a formal dinner. A first dance to that ridiculous 80s ballad we always belted in the car. And now it felt like we were preparing for battle, not a celebration. Still, we kept going. Invitations were resent with security notes attached. Only guests on a pre-cleared list would be allowed entry. 2 guards would be stationed, one at the front gate, one roaming. We'd included photos of Carly, my mother, and my father. They were not welcome. It felt surreal, but necessary. The night before the wedding, Alec and I agreed to sleep apart, not for tradition, but for clarity. I stayed at Isabel's, my best friend since college. She had a way of cutting through my mental fog like a hot knife through butter. "You know," she said, as I tried to iron out the hem of my dress, "when this is over, you'll be bulletproof." I gave her a look. "I'm serious," she said, curling up on the couch with her wine. "They tried everything. Lies, guilt, manipulation. And here you are still standing, still getting married. They lost." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But deep down, I still felt like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it did. At 2:13 p.m., just 47 minutes before the ceremony, there was a knock at the bridal suite door. One of the guards, a tall guy named Reese, with a calm voice and serious eyes, stepped inside. "Miss Collins," he said, "we've detained someone at the back service entrance. Matches the photo of your sister." My heart dropped. She alone? Yes, but she had a tote bag. We checked it. He hesitated, like he wasn't sure how much to say. "What was in it?" I asked, already dreading the answer. He cleared his throat. A large can of red paint, unopened, industrial size. I sank into a chair, the blood rushing from my head. "She was going to destroy the venue," I said flatly. "She was going to ruin everything." Reese gave a short nod. "Would you like us to call the sheriff? You can press charges if you'd like." I stared at the floor. My wedding dress hung beside me, clean and untouched. A symbol of everything I'd tried to preserve through chaos. Isabel knelt beside me. "Jenna," she whispered, "you don't have to let this define your day." I thought about it. The slap, the lawsuit, the fake emails, the doctored photos, and now attempted sabotage with paint. If this had happened to anyone else, I wouldn't believe it. But this was my life now. "No," I said finally. "Don't call the police. Just remove her. Make sure she's nowhere near the ceremony. And double-check that my parents aren't hiding nearby." Reese nodded and left without another word. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore, from exhaustion. "Do you want to postpone?" Isabel asked gently. "No," I said. "I want to marry Alec. That's the only thing that matters today." So I stood, wiped my face, smoothed the front of my dress, and when my Uncle Tom came to escort me down the aisle, I walked beside him with my head high and my heart wide open. The garden was glowing. The sun had slid into the golden hour, casting warm light across the chairs and flowers and faces of people who chose to be there, people who loved us. Alex stood beneath the arch, looking at me like nothing else existed. And in that moment, nothing else did. Not Carly. Not my mother. Not the months of stress and betrayal. Just Alec. Just us. The ceremony was beautiful, raw and real. We wrote our own vows, didn't even care that mine cracked halfway through from emotion. Our guests laughed, cried, and clapped like they'd all been holding their breath for months, too. We danced under the stars, ate tacos off paper plates, clinked glasses, with friends who had traveled across states just to be part of our joy. There were no interruptions, no sabotage, just the quiet, steady rhythm of peace returning. It was the best night of my life. The next morning, Alec and I left early for our honeymoon, a tiny coastal town where no one knew our names. No court dates, no family drama, just silence, waves, and overpriced wine. We slept in, walked barefoot on the beach, ate seafood so fresh it felt like it had jumped onto the plate, and I finally let myself breathe. I didn't check my email once. When we came home 2 weeks later, our apartment felt different, lighter. Maybe it was the ring on my finger, or maybe it was that for the first time, I knew I didn't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace. We used the rest of the $45,000 fund as planned, part for the wedding, part for our honeymoon. And the rest? A down payment on a small townhouse just outside the city. Our first home. It wasn't big. The bathroom tiles were dated. The kitchen needed work. But it was ours. Paid for with planning and patience, not privilege. We painted the walls ourselves, hung wedding photos in the hallway, filled the fridge with the basics, and celebrated with takeout on the floor because the couch hadn't arrived yet. And for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. Until I ran into my cousin Rachel at the grocery store. She leaned over her cart, eyes wide. "Did you hear about Carly's wedding?" I blinked. "No, haven't heard a word. She and Rob are having it at the Grand Oak Hotel downtown. Real lavish, private chef, ice sculptures, the works." My stomach turned. "With what money?" Rachel shrugged. "Your parents took out a loan. It's rumored to be 6 figures." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She added, "Carly's been telling people you weren't invited because you're unhinged." That part didn't surprise me. But what did surprise me was what Rachel said next. "A lot of people are skipping it. Your Aunt Lily, Uncle Nate, even Grandma Rose. They're all uncomfortable with what your parents did to you. Some of them heard about the paint." I raised my eyebrows. "They should be uncomfortable." Rachel smiled. "They are. People talk, Jenna, and most of them, they're on your side." That was the moment I realized Carly's wedding wouldn't be her fairy tale either. Because when you burn bridges long enough, eventually there's no one left to walk across them. I didn't lose sleep over not being invited to Carly's wedding. That alone was proof I'd changed. Old me would have obsessed. Would have checked Instagram every 5 minutes. Watched blurry clips of the reception posted by second cousins. Maybe even felt guilty, like I was the one who broke something. But the woman I'd become, she just opened a bottle of wine, put on a face mask, and spent the evening rewatching her own wedding video. And you know what? It was better the second time around. Still, word of Carly's event spread like wildfire through our extended family. Turns out, when your wedding costs more than most people's mortgages, folks talk. And they were talking. Apparently, my parents spared no expense. Custom invitations sealed with wax. Imported linens. A string quartet flown in from Seattle. Even the cake had gold flakes on it. Gold. On cake. I got texts from distant relatives afterward, some awkward, some not. "Did you hear about the valet mix-up?" one cousin wrote. "Aunt Lydia's car got keyed because they parked it in the staff lot." Another message. "Your mom spent the entire night dodging questions about you. She told people you had a breakdown. That's why you weren't there." Of course she did. When the truth doesn't serve your narrative, you make up a softer version that paints you as the victim. I didn't respond. Let them talk. Let them spin stories about me until they're dizzy. The people who mattered already knew what really happened. And the ones who didn't? They weren't worth chasing. A few weeks later, Alec and I were hosting a small housewarming. Nothing big. Just friends, a few coworkers, and my favorite cousin Elise, who brought a bottle of sangria and the latest gossip. "You'll never guess who defaulted on a personal loan," she said with a grin, sipping her drink. "Your dad co-signed on it. Guess for who? I didn't have to." "Carly," I said, flatly. "Bingo," she replied. Word is, the Grand Oak wedding pushed them into debt territory they didn't plan for. I sat back, letting it sink in. The fun they tried to steal from me? That $45,000 I protected through court filings, depositions, and emotional whiplash? It wouldn't have even covered a third of what they ended up spending on Carly. They gambled with their own future and lost. Alex slid a tray of mini quiches onto the coffee table and gave me a look. "Still feel guilty for cutting them off?" I smiled, small but certain. Not even a little. That was the thing no one tells you about holding boundaries. At first, it feels like you're doing something wrong, like you're betraying your blood. But over time, the guilt fades, and what's left is peace. Real, earned peace. One night, I got an email from a blocked address. It was from my mom. The subject line was one word: perspective. I almost deleted it without opening. Almost. But curiosity won. The message was cold. No greeting, no warmth. Just a collection of excuses dressed up as reflection. "We all make decisions we regret," she wrote. "I wish things could have gone differently. But Carly needed us. You were already stable. It's not about favoritism, it's about survival. Maybe one day, you'll understand that. I read it 3 times. Each time, I got angrier. Not because she still didn't apologize. I'd given up expecting that. But because she was still painting her betrayal as reasonable, like love meant redistributing loyalty to whoever was struggling most. No matter how recklessly they got there, she still didn't get it. So I didn't respond. Instead, I created a new folder in my inbox, labeled it closure, dragged her email into it, and moved on. Later that week, Alec and I were painting our second bedroom, turning it into a home office. I looked around at the half-finished shelves, the open paint cans, the mess on the floor, and felt content in a way I hadn't in years. "This is the life I wanted," I said, brushing a streak of navy blue along the wall. Alec looked up from the baseboard. "Not exactly glamorous." "No," I said, "but it's real. It's ours." We worked in silence for a while, the kind that feels easy, comfortable. And then he asked me, quietly, "Do you think there's a chance things ever go back to normal with your family?" I set the brush down, leaned against the door frame. "Honestly, I don't think I even know what normal ever was." He didn't push. That's something I'd come to love about Alec. He never tried to fix what wasn't his to fix. He just made space for me to figure it out. But that night, as I curled up beside him, I realized something else too. I didn't miss them, not really. I missed the idea of them. The family I'd convinced myself I had, the one that was fair and generous and rooted in unconditional love. But the real version? They were only kind when it was convenient. Loving when it made them look good. And they weaponized guilt like it was currency. That's not family. Family shows up when you're right and when you're wrong. They hold you accountable without tearing you down. They don't ask you to sacrifice your future to cover for someone else's mistakes. They love you in the hard moments, not just the photo-worthy ones. I had that now with Alec, with Elise, with the chosen family we'd slowly built through friends who never judged, who never made me feel small. So no, I didn't miss what I walked away from. I missed who I used to be when I still believed they were different. Months passed. Fall arrived in Hallow Ridge. Leaves turned burnt orange and deep red. The air got crisp. Alec and I spent weekends at the local farmer's market, drinking overpriced cider and buying more candles than we'd ever use. We weren't rich, but we were stable, whole. And then came the letter. It was handwritten. From my dad, no return address, just my name in his familiar handwriting, shaky but still recognizable. I opened it on the porch, sitting in the late October sun. It wasn't long. He didn't defend what they'd done, didn't mention the lawsuit, didn't justify Carly. He just wrote, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you're okay. And I'm sorry I stayed silent. I see now that silence was a choice. And it hurt you. I hope one day that matters less than the fact that I finally said it." I sat there a long time after finishing it, not crying, not angry, just still. Because, unlike the email from my mother, this letter didn't try to control the narrative. It didn't ask me to move on or excuse the past. It just existed, quiet, honest. It wasn't a bridge being rebuilt, but maybe it was a brick. And maybe one brick is all you need to start over someday. I kept the letter, not because I forgave him, not yet, but because it felt like the first true thing he'd said in a long time. There was no manipulation in it, no defense. No, but Carly. Just a simple, quiet acknowledgement that his silence had been a choice, that it mattered. I placed it in the top drawer of my desk, right beside my wedding vows and a couple of old photos from college. It didn't belong in the trash, but it wasn't ready for a frame either. That's where I was with him in between anger and healing, in between the daughter I used to be and the woman I was becoming. Some days, I thought about writing back. Other days, I just wanted to forget he existed. Alec never pushed. He saw me reading the letter once, but didn't ask questions. He just handed me a blanket, kissed the top of my head, and went back to organizing the bookshelves. We kept saying we'd finish. That's the kind of peace I'd started to treasure. The kind that didn't demand anything in return. Meanwhile, Carly's world was starting to crack. Quietly, slowly, but noticeably. I didn't seek out the information, it came to me. Through relatives, old friends, mutual contacts who didn't realize we weren't speaking. Her boutique idea had failed again. This time, a failed contract with a local wedding venue left her with unpaid invoices and an online thread trashing her professionalism. Apparently, she'd promised couples things she couldn't deliver, like custom installations and event coordination skills she didn't have. Someone posted screenshots. It went semi-viral in a local bridal Facebook group. She'd overpromised, again, and underdelivered, again. And guess who was bailing her out? Again. I wasn't smug about it. Okay, maybe for 5 minutes I was. But mostly, I just felt tired. Tired of how predictable it all was. Tired of how far my parents would stretch to shield Carly from consequences while pretending their support was just fairness. But that wasn't my battle anymore. Not anymore. I was busy building a life. Alec and I had settled into a rhythm that felt like home, lazy Sundays, spontaneous ice cream runs, group texts with friends planning weekend getaways. We planted a tiny herb garden on the kitchen windowsill. Most of it died, but we kept trying. We made mistakes, laughed a lot, learned to fight better, not harder. We were good. One chilly November morning, I got a call from Grandma Rose, one of the only relatives who never took sides. She was old school, but sharp as ever. "Sweetheart," she said, "I don't mean to stir the pot, but your mother came by yesterday." My chest tightened. "Oh?" She asked if I could help. "Talk you into reconnecting." I sighed, resting my forehead on the window. Outside, the street was quiet, blanketed in golden leaves. "What did you say?" "I told her she should be the one calling you, not sending an old woman to do her dirty work." I smiled, small and real. "Thanks, Grandma." She hesitated. "You know, I've lived a long time, Jenna, and what your parents did, it's not love, it's control. I don't care how they dress it up." "I know," I said softly. "You don't owe anyone your peace, child. You protect it like a home." That stuck with me all day. You protect your peace like a home. And mine had been under siege for too long. Later that night, I brought it up to Alec while we were folding laundry, matching socks, and sharing takeout straight from the containers. "Do you think I should try?" I asked. "To rebuild something, even if it's just a polite distance?" He paused, thoughtful. "I think," he said slowly, "that if you want to reconnect, it should be on your terms. Not because they're uncomfortable with your silence." I nodded. He was right, so I didn't reach out. Instead, I stayed open. There's a difference. Being open doesn't mean inviting chaos back in. It means leaving the door unlocked, but only for the people who knock respectfully. And in time, some did. Uncle Nate sent a message, just a simple "congratulations again. You two looked really happy." A few cousins started commenting on my photos again. One even apologized privately for not reaching out sooner, saying, "I didn't know how bad it got until recently." That's the thing about truth, it leaks out, even when people try to bury it. Meanwhile, Carly's stories were unraveling. People compared notes. Inconsistencies bubbled up. Some even messaged me asking what really happened. I didn't respond to most of them. Let them figure it out themselves. I wasn't interested in being the family's fact checker. I was done explaining myself. That Christmas, Alec and I hosted a Friendsmas dinner. Warm lights, a potluck-style feast, mismatched plates. It was loud and casual and perfect. Halfway through dessert, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Carly, I know you hate me, but I miss having a sister. I'm sorry for everything. Even if you never talk to me again, I'm sorry." I stared at the screen for a long time. My friends were laughing in the next room. Someone had spilled cider, and Alec was yelling about sticky floors. Music played low in the background. The room felt alive. I looked at the message again. I didn't know if it was real, if it was genuine remorse, or just another attempt at manipulation. But something was different this time. The tone, the timing, the lack of excuses. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't an attack. It was soft. So I didn't delete it. I didn't reply either. Not yet. Some things take time. Some wounds need air before they scar over. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and rejoined the party. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was still humming with leftover laughter, I lay in bed beside Alec and told him about the text. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I turned toward him, pressing my cheek against his chest. "Nothing right now. Maybe something later. But tonight, I just want to remember that life can be beautiful again, even after everything." He nodded, kissed my forehead, and we fell asleep under the soft flicker of the hallway light, wrapped in quiet, in warmth, in a piece I had built from pieces they thought they could break. Winter settled over Hallow Ridge like a thick quilt. The streets were quiet. Trees stood bare, waiting for spring. And for the first time in years, I didn't dread the silence. I welcomed it. Alec and I leaned into the season, slow mornings with coffee, candlelit dinners even when it was just pizza, movie nights with too many blankets. Our little home felt full, even when it was still. One Saturday, I stood by the window, watching the snow drift down in soft spirals. The world looked peaceful, clean, like it had shed something heavy. I felt that way too. Carly never followed up on her message. No calls, no guilt trips, just silence. And honestly, I respected that. Maybe she finally understood that words only mean something when they come with change. I wasn't waiting for a second apology. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. That was the freedom I hadn't realized I'd earned. The lawsuit quietly died months earlier. My parents never pushed it forward again. Probably too expensive, too messy. Or maybe they finally realized they were trying to rewrite a history that too many people already knew. Either way, the legal cloud lifted. And with it, the last traces of fear. But not everything healed quietly. In February, I got another letter. This time from my mother. Handwritten like my dad's. Slanted cursive. A few ink smudges. 3 pages long. It started with a story about my childhood, how I used to collect rocks and line them up along the back porch. She said she never understood why I did that. Said she found it odd. But now, she wondered if I was just trying to build something stable. Something that stayed. She said she still didn't agree with all my choices. But she admitted that her reaction at the engagement party had been unforgivable. She didn't offer excuses, just reflections. And near the end, she wrote, I wanted so badly for both my daughters to have beautiful lives, but I never stopped to realize that trying to control everything only broke what was already working. I should have trusted you more. I'm sorry I didn't. I read the letter twice, once as the daughter still aching, and once as the woman who had moved on, and both parts of me cried, because it didn't erase what happened, but it mattered. Later that night, I sat with Alec on the couch, letter in hand. She wrote this, I said softly, and I think she meant it. He didn't rush me. Just waited. Does it fix everything, he asked? No, I replied, but maybe it plants something. And that's how I started to understand forgiveness. It's not a bridge you build for them. It's a road you build for yourself. You don't forget. You don't excuse. You just let go of the weight. You stop carrying what isn't yours. I didn't reply right away. But I didn't block her either. Instead, I lived. That spring, Alec and I finally took that road trip we'd been talking about since our first date. Just us, a map, and a playlist full of nostalgia. We drove down the coast, stopping in small towns with strange diners and beautiful views. We took photos of everything and nothing. I read books out loud while Alec drove. He learned to love the ocean. I learned to love getting lost. We found a quiet beach one morning, totally empty except for a few scattered shells and the cry of distant gulls. We sat there for an hour without talking, just watching the tide come in, wash the shore, and pull away again. It reminded me of everything we'd been through, the chaos, the grief, the way people try to pull you under, but also the return, the rhythm, the soft reminder that no matter what crashes into your life, there's always a way back to calm. That summer, my dad sent a postcard, no return address again. Just a photograph of a hiking trail we used to visit when I was little. On the back, he'd written, "Still proud of you. Always was." Just took me too long to say it. I pinned it to the fridge. Didn't hide it, didn't obsess over what it meant. It was a gesture, and that was enough. Carly eventually resurfaced in the background noise of social media. She'd started freelancing, doing floral arrangements, and small wedding decor gigs. Word was she'd toned things down. No more big promises. No more luxury facades. Just simple work, quiet hustle. She hadn't reached out again, and I hadn't tried to connect either. We weren't enemies. But we weren't sisters, not in the way that counts. Maybe someday. But today, I was more focused on the life in front of me. Our house was still small, still imperfect. The guest room never quite got finished. The herb garden came back. though this time with Basil that actually survived. Alex swore it was his doing, but we both knew I was the one whispering at the pots every morning like a plant therapist. We hosted dinners, laughed loud, took walks at sunset. We lived the kind of life that didn't look flashy from the outside, but felt full on the inside. One evening, I stood in our kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, while music played low from Alex's phone. I looked around at the dim light, the mismatched bowls, the man setting the table in his pajama pants, and I thought, this is what I fought for. Not just the money, not the vindication, but the right to live without bending, the right to build a future on solid ground, not guilt or obligation, the right to be. Looking back, it's wild to think that everything started with a dinner party and a wine glass tap. A single moment that unraveled the truth. But sometimes that's all it takes. A crack in the surface, a slap that exposes decades of imbalance, a courtroom that holds more than legal weight, it holds clarity. And from that chaos, I found my voice. I found Alec, I found me. So if you're reading this and you've been told to keep the peace at the cost of your own sanity, don't. If you're clinging to family out of fear, not love, let go. Sometimes, walking away is the first real step toward coming home. And when you finally find that home, whether it's a person, a place, or just peace inside your own chest, you'll realize you were never selfish. You were surviving, you were healing, and you were right to fight for yourself. Story 2. There are times in life when there is no warning. Everything is destroyed as they burst into your world. I no longer have the gold jewelry that my mother and grandmother bequeathed me. As simple as that. In my heart, I knew who had taken it. Additionally, I was honest with my husband, Jason. He made no inquiries. He made no effort to comprehend. Rather, he yelled. His eyes grew icy. He took a large porcelain serving dish off the table and slammed it on the side of my head before I could react. It hurt immediately. Dizzy, wounded, and immobile, I fell to the ground. However, my kid did something that shocked me even more than the attack itself. Right when I thought everything was falling apart. I'm 34 years old, and my name is Olivia. 5 years ago, I may have laughed if someone had predicted that my life would descend into treachery, dread, and shattered trust. I was a young, optimistic mother at the time, and I was madly in love with my husband, Jason. I thought that love could triumph over all obstacles, and that family was strong. I also thought that forgiveness was powerful. However, realities we make a concerted effort to deny are sometimes brought to light by reality. I currently reside in Brookhaven with my 2 kids, Leo, a beautiful, perceptive 9-year-old boy who carries more wisdom in his little frame than most adults. I know. And Zoe, my 15-year-old daughter, who is full of adolescent energy and rebellion. I manage phones, patients, and paperwork while smiling politely as a receptionist at a nearby dental office. Even on the days when I feel like my heart is breaking beneath me. From the outside, we could appear to be a typical family struggling to make ends meet. But something darker had taken root in our house. Something that developed gradually and subtly until it was hard to ignore. My spouse, Jason, is 38 years old. He was charming, ambitious, and full of promises when we first met. On the surface, our life appeared to be picture perfect when we were married young and moved into a modest Brookhaven home. However, the man I loved began to change with time. Sharp words and icy looks took the place of the charm. Mostly directed at me, his ambition turned into anger. He started critiquing my actions. The meals I prepared, the way I folded the clothes, the manner in which I addressed the children. I was constantly trying to avoid getting cut, and it seemed like I was walking on shattered glass. He was merely anxious that things will return to normal, I reminded myself. However, they didn't. They simply grew worse. Our daughter, Zoe, has always been fiercely independent and brash. She asks questions about everything. Her tone has also recently taken on a tone that is similar to her father's. She doesn't realize how much I worry for her. Leo, on the other hand, is extremely sensitive and soft-spoken. He sees everything. The tension in the air, my forced grins, and the tears I try not to show. I continued on, despite the rifts that were beginning to appear in our family. I did all I could to shield my kids from the escalating storm, including working, cooking, and cleaning. But the gold jewelry my late mother and grandmother had given me was something I clung to, both physically and emotionally. It was more than just worth it. It was holy, a link to my heritage of powerful women. I stored it in a lockable wooden box behind old blankets in my closet. It was intended for Leo and Zoe, a piece of their legacy one day. I had no idea that sacred box would serve as the catalyst for the scariest night of my life. I had just gotten home from work on a Thursday night. My head was foggy with the typical fatigue, and my feet hurt. As the sun began to set, the living room was bathed in golden light. Leo was quietly sketching in his sketchbook on the floor, while Zoe sat on the couch and browsed through her phone. His sister Jenna was coming home, as she always does these days, but Jason hadn't returned yet. She was in the kitchen, nonchalantly looking through her phone while sipping coffee as if she owned the place. Although Jenna had always been entitled, her presence had increased in frequency and intrusiveness throughout the last 3 weeks. She never volunteered to assist, treated the house like her own lounge, and criticized everything, even my parenting and food. I went to the bedroom to get a little cash after putting my suitcase away. I hid inside the jewelry box. I recalled putting a few emergency bills there in case we needed groceries over the weekend. However, my heart stopped the instant I opened the closet. They moved the blankets. The box was not where it usually was. After digging farther, it was empty when I eventually took it out and opened the lid. There was not a single heirloom gold piece left. The thick bangles engraved with flowers. The necklace is made of 22K gold and has the shape of a flower and blossom. The bracelet with Leo and Zoe's initials, and the ruby stone earrings. My grandma gave me the engraved ring. Lost. I felt a rush of terror. As I retrieved clothing and looked around the closet, my hands shook. I'm hoping I just relocated them and forgot about it. But I knew the truth in my heart. Only one individual who didn't respect limits had lately been inside this residence, and they had been taken. Jen. My stomach turned over. For a minute, I stood motionless, attempting to control my breathing. The value of the jewels went above $30,000. It was a present I wanted my kids to cherish long after I was gone, and it was a part of who I was and the history of my family. Even though my blood was boiling, I knew I needed to go cautiously. Any reference to Jenna's misdeeds had always elicited defensiveness, or worse, wrath from Jason, who could be volatile around her. I couldn't let this go, though. Something has to be said. Shortly after supper, Jason entered, his face tense with annoyance and his tie loosened. He walked into the living room and into the kitchen, where Jenna was still sitting idly, dropping his keys on the table as usual, hardly saying hello to anyone. I knew I couldn't wait, yet the moment seemed heavy. My heart thumped in my chest and my hands felt chilly. "Jason," I responded, attempting to sound steady. "I must speak with you. It's crucial." Already irritated, he glanced at me. "Now what?" After a moment of hesitation, I spoke. "I have no jewelry in my box. Every piece of inherited gold. The fragments from my grandmother and mother. They have vanished." He narrowed his eyes after blinking. "What do you say? Jenna may have taken them." I forced myself to look into his eyes, even though my voice trembled a little. "Our room has been empty of visitors. Last week, I saw that she was wearing my ring. At the time, I didn't give it much thought, but now it's all gone. I can't keep quiet." There was utter silence in the kitchen. Even Jenna, who had just finished her coffee, stopped in her tracks. Jason's cheeks became crimson almost immediately. He faced me, eyes blazing, jaw clenched. "My sister's being accused of stealing by you?" He let out a bark. "Olivia, are you crazy? I'm not making accusations. I'm being honest with you." Even though my voice was shaking now, I remained steadfast. The box was not visible. Only one who was aware of where to search. "Quit." With a shout, he advanced. "Didn't you always despise her? You'll go to such lengths to eject her. I'm telling the truth." I sobbed. The jewelry had a $30,000 value. It was intended for our children. Why wouldn't you? Jason's anger erupted into violence before I could complete the statement. In a single vicious action, he whirled to face the dining table, snatched the big porcelain serving dish from the middle, and slammed it into the side of my head. I fell to the ground with a thud. Beside me, the dish broke. Warm blood trickled close to my temple, blurring my vision, my ears ringing. With the exception of the scream, everything around me slowed. "Mom?" Leah's loud, tremulous voice broke through the confusion. He came running over and knelt next to me. I attempted to talk, but I was at a loss for words. My brain ached. My body was stunned. Leo clambered to stand up. He picked up the phone from the counter, his hands trembling. His little fingers worked swiftly. He was aware of what to do. In instance, I had taught him. "Please," he phoned 911. Through the fog, I could hear him speak. "My dad struck my mother with a big object. She's gushing blood. Come quickly, please." The room began to swirl. Everything turned dark. As soon as I opened my eyes, I lay down on the sofa. A cool cloth was gently put against the side of my face, and a searing, pulsating ache throbbed in my skull. I was momentarily unable to recall what had transpired. Then, everything suddenly returned. The dispute, the charge, the ball, Jason's rage, and my daring little child, Leo. I glanced over and noticed him seated close to me on the floor. His pale eyes were wide with fear, and his knees were pressed to his chest. My neighbor and best friend Elena was crouching next to him, holding his hand and whispering softly. Leo saw me move, and he whispered, "Mom, are you all right?" The sharp knock of urgency reverberated through the front door before I could respond. "Police in Brookhaven, open up." Elena ran to open the door for them. 2 officers came in, looking around the room with calm but firm eyes. One of them, a tall woman with a severe yet sympathetic face, came straight to me. "How are you doing, ma'am? Could you explain what transpired?" I nodded slowly, squirming from the pain as I attempted to sit up. He struck me. My voice was clear but weak as I spoke. "That bowl was used by him. It cracked. I believe I fainted. You got a call from my son." Leo was already being gently questioned by the other officer. Leo gestured toward the shards of broken ceramic on the floor, then to where Jason had been standing. "Now, where is he?" the female officer inquired. I looked in the direction of the corridor. Jason stood motionless close to the entrance. His eyes were wide with shock, and his arms were crossed, but I didn't see guilt in his eyes. Fear was the cause, the fear of being held responsible and of losing control. The male officer firmly said, "Sir, put your hands behind your back and turn around. You must be joking with me." Jason took a step back and mumbled, "This is assault, sir. In front of a minor. You need to come with us." Jason opened his mouth to protest, but before he could say another word, the officer stepped forward, restrained him, and within seconds he was in handcuffs. Zoe had come out of her room during the commotion and stood frozen by the stairs, her hand covering her mouth. Her eyes met mine full of confusion and pain. I reached out to her. "It's over," I whispered. Jason was led out of the house as neighbors peeked through their blinds. Sirens flashing outside for the first time in years, I felt a crack of air pushed through the weight on my chest. Leo sat beside me, holding my hand tightly. Elena stroked his back, tears in her eyes. "You are so brave," she whispered to him. "You did the right thing." And he did. Because of him, we were finally safe. After the police took Jason away in handcuffs, the house was still, but my head throbbed with a deep, pulsing pain. Elena helped me stand, supporting me gently as I swayed slightly. The ceramic bowl had done more than just hurt. It had rattled something inside me. I could feel the swelling building near my temple, and every step made the pounding worse. "You need to go to the hospital," Elena said firmly. "You're bleeding and might have a concussion." I nodded slowly. My kids were shaken, but safe. Now it was my turn to take care of myself for once. Elena drove me to Brookhaven General Hospital. I sat in the passenger seat in silence, holding an ice pack against my head, my mind swimming with everything that had happened. The flashing lights, Leo's frightened voice, Jason's rage, the broken bowl at the ER. I was taken in quickly. A nurse asked me a series of questions. How I got the injury, how long I was unconscious, if I had any dizziness or vomiting. I told her everything. She didn't flinch. She just nodded, typed into her tablet, and reassured me that I was in good hands. The doctor came in not long after he examined the swelling, cleaned the wound, and ordered a CT scan. The results confirmed a mild concussion and a large contusion on the right side of my head. I was lucky, he said. A little more force and things could have been much worse. They gave me pain medication and instructed me to rest for a few days, avoid bright lights and screens, and return immediately if symptoms worsened before I left. The nurse returned with a file in her hands. "These are your medical reports and injury documentation," she said gently. "We've noted that it was a domestic assault. You'll want to keep this safe. It can help you legally." I took the folder with trembling hands, staring at the papers inside, sighed. Photographs of the injury, the doctor's notes, emergency admission records, everything I would need to prove what had been done to me. As I stepped back out into the sunlight, Elena waiting beside the car, I felt a strange kind of strength wash over me. I wasn't just healing, I was building a case. One that would ensure Jason couldn't talk his way out of this. One that would protect me and my children for good. That night, the house was quiet, eerily so after the police left, after the neighbors returned to their own lives, and after Zoe finally went to her room. I sat on the couch with an ice pack pressed against the swelling on my head. My body ached, but not as much as my heart. Elena stayed with us, refusing to leave until she knew I was all right. Leo had finally fallen asleep on the couch beside me, his small hand still clutching mine. I looked down at him, overwhelmed with a mixture of guilt and pride. My 9-year-old son had saved me. He had been braver than most adults I knew. Elena placed a hot cup of tea in front of me and sat down beside me. "You have to press charges," she said gently. "And not just for what Jason did, but for the theft, too." I nodded slowly. "I will. I've had enough." He crossed the line tonight. He almost crossed every line. The next morning, I visited the emergency room. The doctor confirmed that I had a mild concussion and prescribed rest, painkillers, and follow-up visits. The nurse documented my injuries in detail and handed me a copy of the report. "This will help your legal case," she said kindly. And so I began documenting everything with Elena's support. I met with a family lawyer, filed for an emergency restraining order, and officially began divorce proceedings. Jason was being detained in police custody, and I was informed he would be arraigned in court soon. But I wasn't done yet. I also filed a theft complaint against Jenna. When I detailed the circumstances, the lost jewelry, Jenna wearing one of the rings, and the abrupt loss of the heirloom items, the detective assigned to my case nodded sadly. "We'll check into her," he replied. "If we can recover the jewels and establish intent to sell, this might evolve into a criminal theft prosecution." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being heard. I wasn't just a worried wife anymore. I was a mother, a lady, and a survivor, finally sticking up for what was right. 2 weeks after submitting the theft complaint, I got a call from Detective Alvarez, the officer assigned to the investigation. I had just come home from work when my phone rang. My heart skipped a beat as I saw the number. He informed Miss Olivia that we had carried out a search warrant at Jenna Martin's flat. Several items of jewelry that matched the pictures and descriptions you gave us were located. Additionally, the owner of a pawn shop revealed to us that she tried to sell a gold bracelet last week. A wave of emotions washed over me as I stood still in the center of my living room. Disbelief, rage, and relief. "Is she being held?" I inquired. "Yes," he said. "This morning we took her into custody. She faces charges of attempted fraud, grand larceny, and possession of stolen items. This is a Class C felony because of the product's $30,000 worth and the intentional endeavor to sell them. The lawsuit is proceeding. I went to the police station later that week to find and get my valuables. I started crying as soon as I saw the gold bracelet with Zoe and Leo's initials, the thick bangles, my mother's necklace, and the ruby earrings. These were memories, not only objects. Admire my legacy." I was given the release form by Detective Alvarez. "You will receive it all back," he replied. In court, we're holding her responsible. In the defendant's chair, Jenna sat silently. Her attorney asked for mercy, saying it was a desperate moment, but the court didn't bat an eye for larceny over $30 and an attempt to illegally benefit from family treasures, the judge said. Jenna Martin receives a 2-year term in state jail, a lifelong felony theft record, and obligatory reparation to the victim. She would provide real-time service. No house arrest, no probation. Just the harsh truth of what she had done. I was carrying a jewelry box when I left the courthouse. The burden of betrayal began to lessen. I hadn't just retrieved my belongings. I was valuable again. The scent of dust and ancient wood filled the courtroom, silent and still, with the exception of the attorney's sporadic muttering and the shuffle of papers. I waited to see Jason one more time, while sitting on the bench with my hands firmly gripped in my lap. The other side of the aisle, he appeared smaller than I had recalled, chained at the wrists and wearing a rumpled shirt. He refused to look into my eyes. The smug grin had vanished, the sense of mastery. A man unraveled in its place. My name was called by the judge. My legs were shaking yet solid as I stood, and proceeded to testify in the front. I talked about the disagreement that night, the jewelry that was taken, about how, in front of our son, Jason snatched up the heavy porcelain serving dish and hit me so hard that I passed out. When Leo contacted 911, I explained the swelling, the concussion, and the anxiety in his voice. I displayed the police images of the shattered bowl, the medical report, and the nurse's notes. I refrained from crying. I didn't yell. I just spoke the truth, clear, calm, and comprehensive. For the first time, Jason looked at me when I stepped down. However, I felt nothing. No grief, no fear, just a strength that is grounded and peaceful. The court went over the evidence, which included Jenna's theft case and Leo's taped 911 call. He thought for a while, and then he said something that made me shiver. For violent assault in front of a kid, domestic abuse, and jeopardizing the welfare of his children, Jason Martin is now sentenced to 5 years in state prison. In addition to required rehabilitation programs and a permanent restraining order that would prohibit him from ever contacting me or the kids again, he would serve time without being released early. Jason's had fallen. This time, there was no protest, no conceit, nothing but quiet. I signed the official divorce papers later that day. Jason was gone from our life after years of suffering and terror. Not in name, not in body, and not in authority. With my kids waiting for me and my head held high, I left the courthouse. Justice had finally been done, and the chains had been shattered. Now the home felt different. Freer but not quieter. The anxiety, the worry, the continual treading on eggshells, and the shadows that formerly clung to every corner have vanished. Light and breathing room replaced them. I almost forgot that there was such a serenity. Zoe was returning to herself. Her tone was becoming less defensive, and when she worked on her assignments late at night, she would occasionally tap her fingers or listen to gentle music. As she used to do when she was younger, she would occasionally sit next to me and lay on my shoulder. My handsome, courageous child, Leo, had grown even more considerate. Now, not out of fear but out of interest, he asked more questions concerning truth, safety, and families. I never objected when he occasionally slept near me. I could never pay back the amount I owed him. And me? I was getting better. I saw a lady who had survived every morning when I looked in the mirror, not only an assault, but years of psychological damage. I had rediscovered my voice and, along with it, a power I was unaware I possessed. Throughout it all, Elena supported me by assisting me with court paperwork, bringing over supper when I was too exhausted to prepare it, and holding my hand when I felt like the weight of it all was about to overwhelm me once again. We watched the sun set behind the roofs one evening, while we sat on my back patio. "It's unbelievable that it's actually over." Silently, I said. "It's not finished yet," Elena grinned. "It's only the beginning. You can now write the life you've always wanted." With a hot cup of tea in my hands, I nodded. She was correct. Even though there was still uncertainty in the future, I was no longer terrified of it. I was no longer alone. I was safe, and I was free. Olivia is my name. My age is 34. I was cut off. I was shattered. However, I got up. I battled and recovered. I'm at last whole now. I appreciate you sticking with me through my entire story. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel if my story moved you or served as a reminder that you are not alone in your challenges. I am so grateful for your support, which also helps others discover these inspirational tales of hope, healing, and strength. I'm Olivia, and if I can make it through, so can you. Story 3. I always believed that the happiest day of my life would be my wedding. However, It devolved into an unanticipated pandemonium instead of happiness. I was grinning in my white dress 1 second, and then everything blew out. In front of me, my mother-in-law deceived my husband with her icy words and phony tears. Then he lost his temper. He shoved me so hard that my head banged against the table's corner, tugged my hair, and slapped me across the face. The subsequent events were much more startling. Hi there, I'm Nina Carter, and I'm 28 years old. I had dreamed of my wedding day for as long as I could remember, thinking it would be the start of a happy new life. Pastel flowers, soft lighting, and the sweet sound of violins filling the air adorned the space. The guests clinked their drinks and chuckled. The perfume of the evening meal mixed with the scent of fresh flowers. I felt like a bride from a fairy tale as I stood in my white gown with everyone cheering and grinning. Love was my choice, and I thought I was entering a lovely world. On the surface, everything appeared to be ideal. Ethan Reynolds, my now husband, was a lovely, articulate man who always managed to put people at ease. After 2 years of dating, I believed we understood one another. I thought we were creating something solid and long-lasting. As people gathered to welcome me and praised my clothes, cosmetics, and shine, I smiled pleasantly. I gave a kind response, nodded, and tried to take in every happy element. Then, among the quiet music and laughing, I heard a voice that made my stomach turn. "Nina, my love." On the surface, the voice was beautiful, yet it had a harsh edge, colder. "Would you mind spending a little time here?" Ethan's mother, Margaret Reynolds, was standing a short distance away when I turned. She folded her arms across her chest and smiled tightly. She scanned me with judging eyes. That smile was calculated and devoid of emotion. She didn't ask in her tone. It was a request. After a moment of hesitation, I stepped near her and graciously excused myself from a group of friends. It felt weird, but I forced myself to remain composed. This was my wedding day after all. I was thrilled for all the right reasons. But I could see something wasn't right when I got closer to her. She had a perfectly straight back. She made a forced face. Beneath her charming veneer, something sinister was simmering, and I was about to step straight into it. I smiled at Margaret, the same courteous look I had given each of the guests that night. "Is everything okay?" Even though a slight anxiety had begun to build up in my chest, I asked in a calm voice. Throughout our engagement, I had done my best to be courteous, even though I knew Margaret and I would never be close. But what she then said took me entirely by surprise. With a calm yet flaming voice, she started, "It's about the way you look at me, Nina. The way you see, you believe I haven't noticed. How do you roll your eyes when I say something? Despite my advanced age, I am not blind. I am not respected by you. And now you've been worse than ever on the day of my own son's wedding." Startled, I blinked. "Margaret, I think you're misinterpreting me," I said softly. "I've never treated you disrespectfully. I've always made an effort to be courteous." "Be courteous," she yelled. "You're sly. Ever since the beginning, you have been using Ethan against me, and you dare not act like that." The visitors around her began to pay attention as her voice became louder. I saw people turning. A couple of them muttered to themselves. I made an effort to speak steadily, feeling the tension that was already pervasive in the air. "I assure you, Margaret, that is untrue. All I want is for us to live in harmony." Ethan suddenly materialized by our side, obviously knowing that something was off. His gaze shifted from me to his mother. "What's happening?" Before I could respond, he questioned, his brows wrinkled. Margaret leaned forward like a mother who has been injured, her hands shaking as she sought for his arm. With tears in her eyes, she continued, "Your wife has been cruel to me. She treats me like a burden and talks down to me. She has remained icy even today, of all days." Ethan's face changed in a second, from worry to incredulity to something more difficult. "Nina, is that accurate?" He looked directly at me as he asked. "No, it is untrue." With my heart racing, I said, "I've never been disrespectful to her. She's telling lies." Margaret broke off with an exaggerated cry. "Ethan, you were raised by me, your mother. On your wedding day, would I tell you a lie?" It was an unbelievable moment. I was facing the man I recently got married to. Someone who had never welcomed me was accusing me of something I hadn't done. Now, everyone was watching us. Ethan peered at me, his breathing irregular and shallow, his mouth clenched. For a moment, I could see the storm building behind his eyes. I remained optimistic that he may decide to put his faith in me, to support me, and to calm this chaos. But he mumbled. That hope broke the moment. I've been being made fun of by you. Silently. Before I could take a step back or even comprehend his meaning, Ethan sprang forward, snatched a hold of my hair and pulled it back so hard I staggered. I let out a piercing yell as my scalp began to hurt. Across the room, gasps sprang out. A couple people dropped their glasses in fright, and I witnessed stunned faces frozen mid-taste. The smack followed. His hand splintered firmly on my cheek. The noise reverberated across the quiet room. My head jerked to the side, and my flesh hurt quickly. I hardly had time to process what had just transpired. Ethan suddenly pushed me in front of everyone, his eyes blazing with rage. I lost my equilibrium and crashed into an adjacent table. I fell to the ground, bleeding and bewildered, as the corner of it struck the side of my skull. My eyesight was blurry, my breath was coming in short gasps, and I could feel warm blood dripping from my scalp. With the exception of the noises of breathing, yelling, and shuffling in disbelief, the room had fallen quiet. Someone said, "Dial 911 right away," and I heard footsteps running across the floor, but they were indistinct. A woman's voice screamed, "She is bleeding. She's bleeding. Oh God." I had the impression that I was looking at everything from below. My cheek burned, my brain hurt, and my heart thumped. The truth slamming into me was worse than all of that, though. Not only had I been humiliated by the man I had recently married, I had been attacked in public by him. In a matter of minutes, outside the arena, red and blue lights started to flash. The paramedics arrived with the cops. Although there was a gathering, everyone dispersed as the cops came inside the hall. Ethan's chest heaved as he stood still, pale face. Now that he had come to terms with what he had done, 2 policemen came up to him. "Respected sir, your hands should be visible to us." "Firmly," one said. Slowly, Ethan lifted his hand. He stumbled. "Wait, I didn't mean," but it was too late. "You have been arrested for domestic abuse and assault." As he handcuffed him, the officer said, "The right to silence is yours." Margaret attempted to step in. "There is a miscommunication here. He was being provoked by her." Despite her tears, the cops disregarded her and took her away from Ethan. As I was being carried onto the stretcher, one of the paramedics crouched next to me and carefully examined my wound as another police questioned me and obtained witness testimonies from visitors. Something had changed inside of me, yet I could hardly talk. The truth was at last apparent to everyone, but the fairy tale had ended violently and in public. With sirens, bright lights, and the calm voice of a paramedic urging me to remain alert, the ambulance trip seemed to go by in a whirl. Every bump of the car sent new waves of nausea rushing through me, and my head ached. Even though I was too weak to talk, I persisted. Not just to ensure my physical existence, but also because I had an inner voice that insisted on telling my narrative. The emergency staff at the hospital worked fast. In addition to cleaning and treating the blood on the side of my head, I was prescribed pain medicine. The physician verified that there was a deep cut and a little concussion. To rule out internal harm, they performed a scan, and happily the results were negative. However, I would require several days of relaxation and careful monitoring. Although I could feel the worry in their eyes as they went over my file with the domestic assault designation, the staff was courteous and compassionate. Later in the evening, I laid in a quiet room. Around me, I could hear machinery beeping gently, and the air smelled strongly of antiseptic. My face was bloated as I gazed at the ceiling. My head was tightly and painfully bandaged. I repeatedly relived the incident, including how Margaret pushed the issue, how Ethan lost his temper, and how nobody intervened until it was too late. I didn't feel like a victim, though. No more. The hurt, the suffering, the embarrassment, they were all really authentic. However, another thing had also emerged within me, a fire, a determination to defend oneself, with the truth and the law, not with fury or violence. I had trusted the wrong individuals. Now, though, I would take things one step at a time to regain my authority. An officer came back the next morning to get my whole statement. I told them everything, Margaret's charges, Ethan's response, and the actual assault. A number of visitors have already provided statements attesting to their observations. Before he departed, the officer gave me the assurance that Ethan would stay in detention and that charges were being handled. "Ma'am," he said kindly, "do you plan to press full charges?" I didn't think twice. "Every charge possible," I said. "I want a divorce and a restraining order." The policeman gave a nod. "That day you're doing morally." I also made an emergency consultation appointment with a lawyer over the phone. Even if my head wound was new, my choice was also. I wouldn't return. I would not be quieted down. Additionally, I would ensure that Margaret and Ethan were held accountable for their actions. 2 days after I was released from the hospital, I didn't return to Ethan's house or even the apartment where we were supposed to live following the wedding. Rather, I remained with Rachel, a friend from my youth who came to my aid as soon as she learned of what had transpired. Her existence was a boon. She didn't ask me questions or show me sympathy. She just prepared tea, sat with me, and let me know I wasn't alone. However, I was aware that compassion would not be sufficient to keep me safe. Not from Margaret, and definitely not from Ethan. The wedding event had just been the tipping point. I saw a lot of indicators as I looked back. I had disregarded odd financial activity, emotional pressure, and subtle manipulation. I needed proof now, and I demanded answers. At that point, I made the decision to work with Darren Cole, a private investigator. He was well regarded for managing delicate domestic matters. I was also impressed by his expertise and attentiveness when I met him in his quiet office on the west side of town. Opening a notebook, he said, "Miss Carter, I know you're looking for proof." "Yes," I firmly said. "Not only the attack that has been reported. I think Margaret and Ethan were concealing financial information, among other things. There were certain transactions I didn't understand, and I believe she is in charge of his company accounts. I desire everything. Any financial manipulation, emotional abuse, or criminal behavior, if any. I want it exposed." Darren gave a nod. "I get it. We'll start with surveillance, bank tracking, and background checks. Additionally, I will collect character reviews from others they have worked with, dismissed, or argued with. We'll find something there if there is." Darren, on the other hand, started working. I also began gathering my own proof. I reviewed all of my voicemails, emails, and texts to substantiate the idea that the events at the wedding weren't an isolated incident. I copied it to Darren and sent it all to my attorney. I received assistance from Rachel in organizing digital folders and data, and I could see the terror inside of me waning as the days went by. A feeling of purpose emerged in its stead. I wasn't going to simply get well. I intended to reveal them. Darren worked quietly but effectively during the course of the following 2 weeks. He sent me updates that made my stomach turn every time he checked in with me. Every time I read them, I became more aware of how little I actually understood about Ethan and the environment Margaret had created for him. As he unearthed more, we went over the most recent results one evening while I sat at Rachel's kitchen table with my laptop open. Darren had sent, "Take a look at this." Pointing at the television, I said, "Ethan made many sizable payments from his personal business account to a shell corporation that was set up under a false name. However, the address points to a Margaret-owned home." Rachel's eyes were wide as she leaned forward. "Money laundering is what she's doing. She's using Ethan to accomplish it." And I nodded. 2 former workers of Ethan's business were also interviewed for Darren's story. They had both been fired under dubious circumstances. Forces. Margaret was characterized as pushy, domineering, and dangerously manipulative. She frequently approved payments without his team's knowledge since she had access to Ethan's financial systems. One worker even said that he had suspicions of tax fraud, but was too scared to report them at the time. In addition to this, Darren discovered something even more concerning. Ethan and Margaret had quietly changed a prenuptial agreement without telling me. When my original signed document vanished, Darren found a revised form that had been discreetly filed 2 weeks prior to the wedding and had significant financial limitations on me in the event of a divorce. It was fake. Someone had digitally altered my signature. I sent everything right away to my lawyer. As I sat back in the chair, exhausted but enraged, I told Rachel that this was no longer just about abuse. Even if Ethan hadn't hit me, they would still have been planning to defraud me and deceive me. Rachel touched me with her hand. "Nina, you've already made it through the worst of it. It's time to reveal their true selves to the world. I gazed at the pile of digital files and printed documents. Everything was there: the crime, the lies, the manipulation, and the abuse. Now I just needed to shine the light on it. It wasn't a random day when I made the decision to reveal everything. It was calculated. I invited friends, family, old coworkers, and even some journalists I knew from Rachel's connections in the media. The event, which took place in a downtown private hall that was rented out, was presented as a personal announcement. Following the wedding scandal, the majority of people thought it was about healing or possibly charitable work. Nobody was ready for what I was going to disclose. As people sat down, the room was alive with interest. Dressed as if she were going to a fundraiser, Margaret arrived with her typical fake grace. Warmly welcoming visitors is a skillfully practiced greeting. Not far behind was Ethan, who attempted to conceal his uneasiness behind a courteous smile. The narrative was about to shift, but they still thought they controlled it. I strode to the front, wearing a modest yet assured outfit, and peered out over the crowd. Despite my racing heart, I spoke calmly. I appreciate everyone's attendance. I started. I am aware that a lot of people have been speculating about what transpired at my wedding today. I'm here to tell the truth about that day, as well as about the events leading up to it and what I learned afterwards. Margaret paused her smile. On the day of our wedding, Ethan Reynolds physically attacked me. A lot of you saw it. The whole story was hidden from you. Years of covert financial fraud, emotional blackmail, and a deliberate scheme to deceive me with fake court filings. Gasps rippled through the room. I continued, "What I'm about to show you is not opinion. It is documented evidence, recorded conversations, text messages, forged contracts, and financial transfers that prove Ethan and Margaret's involvement in illegal activity and abuse." I turned and gave a signal. A large screen behind me lit up, displaying emails and bank transactions. The room fell completely silent. An audio recording began to play, Ethan's voice mocking and cruel, dismissing me and laughing with Margaret about how she won't see it coming. Then images of a forged prenuptial agreement appeared side by side with the authentic one. Darren had recovered from my original paperwork. Margaret stood up, her voice shaking. "This is slander. You have no right. I have every right." I cut in sharply, "And everything you see here has been shared with law enforcement. There are multiple criminal investigations already in motion." Ethan looked like he'd been punched in the gut. The guests were in shock. Some stared at them in disbelief. Others turned away in disgust. "This isn't just my story," I concluded. "It's the story of anyone who has ever been deceived, silenced, or attacked behind closed doors. I won't be a victim. I won't be quiet. And I won't stop until justice is done." The crowd slowly began to applaud. First a few, then nearly everyone. Cameras flashed. Reporters took notes. Margaret tried to leave, but two detectives who had arrived discreetly approached her at the door and asked her to stay for questioning. I stood tall, unshaken. I had ripped off the mask they wore for the world, and there was no turning back. A month later, I found myself sitting in a courtroom, this time not as a bride, not as a victim, but as a woman determined to take back her life. The air inside was cold, sterile, and filled with tension. On one side of the room sat Ethan and Margaret, both looking far from the powerful, polished figures they once were. Ethan's jaw was clenched, his eyes empty. Margaret looked visibly aged, her usual poise replaced with fear and agitation. My lawyer, Miss Harper, sat beside me, calm and composed, a thick binder of evidence open on the desk between us. We were prepared. We had documentation, digital records, video clips, and witness testimonies. Darren's investigation had left no stone unturned. "Your Honor," Miss Harper began with a steady voice, "this is not just a divorce case. What we present today is a detailed account of abuse, emotional, physical, financial, and criminal misconduct. We are seeking a complete divorce for legal protection for my client and formal charges for assault, fraud, and forgery." The judge listened attentively, nodding slightly. The prosecution began with the most visible crime, the assault of the wedding. Several guests, including Rachel, were called to testify. They spoke clearly about what they saw, how Ethan pulled my hair, slapped me, and pushed me onto the table. resulting in a head injury that required emergency treatment. The medical report was submitted, along with photos of my injuries. Ethan tried to defend himself. It was a mistake. I lost control for a second. I was provoked. His voice cracked, but no one looked convinced. Margaret's defense was weaker. I only wanted to protect my son, she said. Nina twisted everything, but their words fell flat. My lawyer presented financial records showing Margaret's access to Ethan's accounts, unusual money transfers, and the forged prenuptial agreement that had been digitally altered. A forensic specialist confirmed the signature was manipulated. When it was my turn to speak, I stood with my heart steady and gaze firm. Your Honor, I came into this marriage believing I was building a life with someone I loved. Instead, I was betrayed, abused, and nearly trapped in a web of lies. What happened on our wedding day was not the beginning. It was the final blow. But I survived it, and I am here not for pity, but for justice. There was a quiet in the courtroom as I concluded. Miss Harper delivered the last comment. Given the overwhelming evidence, we asked this court to issue a finding that not only granted Miss Carter a divorce, but also holds Mr. Reynolds and Miss S. Reynolds completely responsible for their crimes under the law. The courtroom was utterly still as the judge went over the final stack of paperwork. Her countenance was opaque, but her eyes held a weight that filled the room with expectancy. I held my breath. I could feel Rachel's hand softly resting on my shoulder for comfort, but I kept my focus set on the judge, determined not to exhibit fear. After a long pause, the judge spoke clearly and strongly in light of the comprehensive and reliable evidence given. The court granted the petitioner, Miss Nina Carter, a full and immediate divorce from Mr. Ethan Reynolds. I closed my eyes for a brief second and breathed. It was done, but she wasn't finished. Furthermore, she added, this court finds Mr. Reynolds guilty of domestic abuse and aggravated battery. Supported by medical records and eyewitness testimony for this, the court convicts Mr. Reynolds to 7 years in state jail without the option of early release. Gasps flooded the courtroom. Ethan's had slid into his palms. The judge then shifted her focus onto Margaret, who had gone pale. You have been found guilty, Miss S. Margaret Reynolds, of money fraud, legal document manipulation, and helping to hide abusive behavior. According to state law, the fabricated prenuptial agreement is a criminal in and of itself. For fraud and conspiracy, you are been given a 5-year jail term. Margaret's wail was muted. It reverberated oddly in the now quiet room, where everyone was staring at her with a mixture of hatred and incredulity. The gavel dropped. The court has been postponed. Like a door slamming shut on a protracted, agonizing chapter of my life, the sound was definitive. I remained mute as the guards escorted Margaret and Ethan out of the courthouse in handcuffs. I refrained from boasting. I refrained from crying. I just stood up, knowing that I had done what I had to do for all the women who had ever been silenced. Not just for myself. Everyone who had ever experienced manipulation, abuse, or been made to feel inferior. I had suppressed my voice, and nobody was able to take it away from me this time. The study lasted for weeks. And with each day that goes by, my chest started to feel lighter than it had before. The headlines dwindled. Slowly, the public's focus changed, and I was able to breathe without dread for the first time in a long time. On paper, I wasn't free. In spirit, I was free. After leaving the city, I discovered a peaceful house in the hills outside of Eden Brook, a tiny village. It wasn't a big fancy house, but it was mine. It included a view of the mountains that turned golden every sunset, a wraparound porch, and a garden that required some maintenance. I sat quietly, watching the sun rise in the mornings, while sipping a warm cup of tea. There was only the sound of songbirds and breeze through the trees. No yelling, no stress, no treading carefully. Rachel kept in touch, paying me many visits and letting me know how far I had come. We would occasionally sit for hours discussing nothing at all. She never viewed me as a victim, but rather as a strong, victorious woman. I would never forget that her companionship had been my bulwark throughout my darkest hours. I went back to writing. Initially, only brief diary entries, followed by essays and articles. A local women's magazine took up one of them, which was about overcoming physical and emotional abuse. The reaction was tremendous. Readers who had felt, seen, heard, and been inspired began to send messages. I came to see that sharing my experience was not just therapeutic, but also potent. I still get asked occasionally, "How did you handle everything?" And I consistently gave the same response. Ethan and Margaret's actions were hurtful, calculating, and cruel because I refused to let them define me. They didn't break me, though. I learned who I really am as a result of their revealing who they were. More courageous, smarter, and stronger than I ever thought possible. One evening, I stood on my porch and grinned as the sun sank over Eden Brook, illuminating the sky with hues of orange and lavender. The lady I used to be, the white gown optimistic bride, she had left. Someone more courageous took her place. Someone who retaliated. Someone who prevailed. But my narrative did not stop here. It was only the start. I sincerely appreciate you hearing my tale. If you were moved by my story, or if you know someone who needs the courage to advocate for themselves, remember to like this video, please. It really does help. Tell these tales to people who are in need. Please share your opinions, experiences, or encouragement in the space provided for comments below. Every voice counts. Additionally, be sure to subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more compelling tales like mine that are honest, unvarnished, and full of truth. More voices can be heard and more stories can be shared thanks to your help. Till the next occasion, remain compassionate, resilient, and unafraid to speak your mind.